When we think of the atrocities of World War II, the shadow cast by Nazism is enormous. Massacres, gas chambers, and entire camps dedicated to extermination. But the truth is more uncomfortable, grayer, and bloodier. Because in that conflict, not only the followers of the Führer left a trail of death, entire villages vanished without ever seeing a German uniform. Cities were reduced to ashes by those who came to liberate them. Mass executions, without trial or pardon. In Eastern Europe, communist partisans massacred thousands of men, women, and children in Kočevski Rog, accused of collaborating with the enemy. In Volhynia, Ukrainian nationalism unleashed a brutal ethnic cleansing against the Polish minority, leaving nearly 100,000 corpses in the fields. And in Dresden, Allied bombs fell like a deluge of fire upon a defenseless town, sparking a firestorm that consumed tens of thousands of civilians. Not all atrocities were committed in the name of Hitler. Some marched under red flags with stars or promises of freedom. And in this new episode of Military History, we will uncover what lies hidden behind the shadows of war. The Volhynia Massacre. Around 100,000 Poles were slaughtered in a forgotten corner of Eastern Europe, and the Third Reich had nothing to do with it. Women burned alive in their homes, children smashed against walls, elders slaughtered with sickles, churches burned with the faithful still inside. Entire villages wiped from the map. The Volhynia Massacre was not just a killing. It was a brutally planned ethnic cleansing. A bloodbath that erupted in the dim backdrop of the Eastern Front while the world's eyes were fixed on Berlin. Volhynia was a vast region of gentle hills, dense forests, and wheat fields. Before the war, Poles, Ukrainians, Jews, Czechs, and Germans lived there. A true human mosaic. Differences didn't seem to bother anyone. They shared villages, trades, and religious festivals. Yet one thing they also shared was silent grudges. After the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in 1939, the region fell under Soviet control. Stalin's repression was immediate. Mass deportations, forced collectivization, and selective assassinations. But in 1941, with the Nazi invasion, the uniforms changed, and horror continued under a different face. During the German occupation, Volhynia was trapped between the Nazi killing machine and the growing tension between Poles and Ukrainians. This latter conflict, however, had deeper roots. Relations between the two peoples were scarred by decades of distrust, grievances, and territorial disputes. In the interwar period, Poland had dominated the region, suppressing expressions of Ukrainian nationalism. That simmering resentment found, in the chaos of war, its moment to explode. This was when the organization of Ukrainian nationalists, known as the OUN, emerged, especially its most radical faction, the OUNB, led by Stepan Bandera. For them, the dream of a free Ukraine was only possible if they eliminated those they saw as foreigners, Poles, Russians, and Jews. In Volhynia, the Poles were the closest and most numerous target. The nationalists wanted an ethnically pure Ukraine, and to achieve it, they unleashed terror. The power vacuum caused by the partial withdrawal of German forces was exploited by the Ukrainian insurgent army, the armed branch of nationalism. The operation began in 1943. At dawn, Polish villages were attacked while their inhabitants slept. It was not an outburst of spontaneous violence, but an organized plan. Lists were drawn, weapons distributed, and peasants recruited. Priests even blessed the militiamen before the massacres. Their God agreed with taking those lives and with the indescribable horrors that would follow. In some villages, Poles were gathered in churches and then shot at point-blank range. In others, the killers used axes and knives to save ammunition. In many cases, the executioners were neighbors, people they knew. Homes were destroyed, possessions looted, documents burned. It was total eradication, physical and cultural. Some Polish towns disappeared forever. Górał, with 480 inhabitants, ended with only 70 survivors. In Orzeszyn, 270 of the 340 residents were murdered. In Sadowa, only 20 out of 600 remained alive. The same was repeated everywhere. The few who survived fled west, leaving behind anonymous graves. Ethnic hatred, manipulated for years by Soviets and Nazis alike, had erupted with medieval violence. The Volhynia massacre was not only a tragedy, it was a warning. A stark example of what happens when nationalism, historical resentment, and chaos combine. And although for decades it was silenced or minimized, today it stands as one of the darkest chapters of World War II, one in which the executioners did not speak German, but carried fanaticism in their hearts. However, it was not the only one. What happened in Poland was no exception. When many believed the war was over and Europe celebrated the fall of Nazism, something was brewing in the heart of Yugoslavia. The tanks had stopped, the cannons had gone silent, but a cruel vengeance was unleashed. The forests of Kočevski Rog in southern Slovenia became a slaughterhouse, a natural abyss into which between 30,000 and 50,000 men were thrown, many still alive but destined for oblivion.
Leševi su bacani u duboke jame. Zatim su partizani bacali u jame ručne bombe za svaki slučaj, da neko ne bi preživeo. Pored dobrovoljaca i četnika, ubijeno je nekoliko hiljada slovenačkih domobranaca, koji su bili odani kralju.
It began with a diplomatic act that, to the world's eyes, seemed like standard post-war logic. In May 1945, British forces in Austria handed over thousands of Slovenian prisoners to Yugoslav partisans, soldiers, officers, and even civilians who had surrendered after fleeing the communist advance. They were members of the Slovenian Home Guard, a force created with German support to fight the communist partisans during the Nazi occupation. But among them were also women, elderly people, and young men who simply feared reprisals from the new regime. The British did not know what they were unleashing, or perhaps preferred not to know. For Josip Broz Tito's Yugoslav partisans, these men were not just military enemies. They were traitors, fascist collaborators, and obstacles to the birth of a new communist Yugoslavia. The decision was clear: no trials, no mercy. Instead, an ideological purge disguised as revolutionary justice. In a country without functioning courts, the partisans imposed their law with rifles, ropes, and dynamite. Kočevski Rog, with its dense vegetation and deep caverns, was chosen as the stage for mass execution.
Gole I vezane, dobrovoljce, crnogorske četnike, komunisti odvode iznad dubokih jama Kočevskog Roga, jer su verovali da njihove kosti tu nikad neće biti pronađene. Dovedeni na ivice Kočevskih jama, pre nego ih partizani ubiju, neki su hrabro poviknuli: dignimo glave, lepo je umreti za otadžbinu, braćo moji.
Prisoners were transported by truck, pushed to the edge of natural pits up to 100 meters deep, and thrown into the void. Those who survived the fall were finished off with bullets or explosives. Some were even buried alive. The bodies piled up in the depths like waste, without names, crosses, or the right to remembrance. Often, the mental burden of those deaths weighed heavily on the executioners, with madness being a common price for such brutality.
Poslije izvjesnoga vremena, kad oni odu gore, brat, kaže, ovi su pobijeni, ajde sad vozi drugu grupu, 300, 500, oni odvezu drugu grupu, pomlati tu drugu grupu, kažu, mi smo to potukli, dobro, naveć se završi, šta dalje, bacite, trotili, ne znam šta, da neko ne izađe vam.
Mnogi partizani su poludeli od ubijanja i klanja.
Ne znam ti Periša koji je bio jedan od glavnih egzekutora i koji je vidio od najbolje te jame koji je to sve obilazio gore, on je sam završio tako, on je ubio i ženu, i djecu i sebe.
The Kočevski Rog massacre was only one piece of the bloody machinery set in motion during those days of euphoria and reconstruction. In many Slovenian towns, thousands more were executed in what is now known as the Yugoslav postwar massacres. The total number of victims remains debated, with historians estimating between 50,000 and 200,000 people killed without trial, under the banner of people's justice. For Tito and his followers, it was the necessary cost of revolution. For the victims' families, it was a double betrayal, first by those who handed them over, and then by those who buried them in silence. For decades, speaking of Kočevski Rog was taboo. Under the communist regime, pits were sealed, records hidden, and graves covered by forest. Only after the fall of Yugoslavia did testimonies and investigations begin to emerge. Once again, it was not the Nazis behind the killing weapons. In this last case, it was the German people themselves who became the victims. The first wave came at dusk, silent at first, until the sky turned red and burst into flames. Tons of incendiary bombs began to rain on rooftops. Cobblestone streets filled with craters, squares overflowed with refugees. An hour later, Dresden was no longer a city. It was hell.
Heil Hitler!
The air turned to fire. Temperatures reached 1,500 degrees Celsius. Asphalt melted, bodies fused to walls, and people died under a storm of flames, devouring everything in its path. Mothers running with children in their arms turned into charred shadows. In just 3 days, between February 13th and 15th, 1945, the city was destroyed by 4 waves of British and American bombings. Between 22,000 and 25,000 civilians died. Some bodies were never identified. Others were never found. Dresden was not Berlin, the capital of the Third Reich, nor Hamburg, which had suffered the same fate years earlier as a key industrial hub. Why then was it chosen as a target? Although it was not a military production center, Dresden was a cultural and historical city, famous for its Baroque architecture, museums, operas, and libraries. It had been called the Florence of the Elbe. In the last months of the war, it had also become a massive refuge for German civilians fleeing the Soviet advance. It was overcrowded. Trains brought the elderly, women, and children from the east. There was no air defense, no major garrisons, just a city overflowing with people trying to survive. Yet it was chosen. The Allied High Command, led by Winston Churchill and Arthur Harris, wanted to send a message and demoralize Germany to hasten its surrender. The operation was surgically planned to maximize destruction. The first wave dropped explosive bombs to tear off roofs and open buildings. The second, an hour later, dropped thousands of incendiary bombs. Then came 2 more daytime attacks by American planes when survivors were trying to rescue bodies or flee. It was not a military operation. It was an infernal choreography. The historic center was completely destroyed. Churches, hospitals, schools, museums. Nothing was left standing. Everything collapsed like a sandcastle. Official figures speak of up to 25,000 dead. Contemporary accounts estimated even more. What is certain is that Dresden became a symbol of an open wound, perhaps unnecessary and possibly a war crime. This attack was a firm step toward the brutal tactic of forcing enemy surrender through the mass killing of innocent civilians. And after this atrocity came something worse. The nuclear bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Historians still debate whether such practices were truly necessary. But one thing is clear. The Dresden massacre was not an inevitable consequence of war. It was a choice. These are the postcards of World War II. Nazi concentration camps and the entire killing machine still send shivers down our spines, preserved in humanity's memory. Yet the conflict proved to be a monster that devours everything, distinguishing neither side's uniform. Many times, under the rubble, lie crimes not committed by the defeated, but also by the victors. Atrocities not carried out under the swastika or by order of Adolf Hitler, but in the name of other causes, other ideals. In Volhynia, 100,000 Poles were killed by Ukrainian nationalists dreaming of a homeland without foreigners. In Kočevski Rog, between 30,000 and 50,000 people were thrown into the abyss. And in Dresden, at least 25,000 civilians burned to death in a firestorm caused by Allied bombings. None died at Nazi hands. Yet all were victims of the endless horrors of World War II. Thus, we reach the end of this video. We look forward to seeing you in our next episode as we continue to explore more of military history. Thank